Now, Senator Bernie Sanders, along with a lot of progressives, are really upset about the United States being involved in the war in Yemen. Now, it hasn't gotten a lot of news, hasn't gotten a lot of press attention, the war in Yemen, because, look, I guess there's a bunch of myriad reasons. There's the news cycle being so insane. There's also the news generally not paying attention to human rights abuses in Middle Eastern countries. So there's a lot of, I guess, a lot of valid reasons or not very valid reasons where or for the news not paying attention to this humanitarian crisis. Now, I think the only reason that they're paying attention is now because of the death of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who was a very big critic of Saudi Arabia. So now everybody is paying attention, and Bernie Sanders is actually trying to end our involvement in the Yemen, in the crisis in Yemen. On Wednesday afternoon, the Senate voted 63 to 37 in favor of allowing floor debate on SJ Resolution 54. Now, that is the joint resolution to direct the removal of United States armed forces from hostilities in the Republic of Yemen that have not been authorized by Congress. Now, Sanders has advanced this piece of legislation with Senators Chris Murphy, Mike Lee, and 14 other co-sponsors. So this is a huge Democratic-backed effort to end our involvement in the war in Yemen. Now, actually, all 49 Senate Democrats did back the resolution, which basically pushes back against both Trump and the Republicans who love Saudi Arabia. Now, they were joined by 14 Republicans, including Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chair Bob Corker. So, only 14 Republicans joined in ending our involvement in Yemen. What about the rest of them? No, the rest of them think, war in Yemen? No, I love it. No, I love the fact that we are backing Saudi Arabia, which is a fundamentalist, despotic regime that beheads people and is basically extreme fundamentalist Muslim. We're okay with that. We're okay with our involvement leading to mass starvation. We're fine with that. We don't care. They're Yemenis. Who gives a shit, right? Well, progressives do. We do. Now, unsurprising is some of the Republicans who had voted against this piece of legislation ended up getting paid by Saudi Arabian lobbyists. Now, at least 5 Republican senators who voted against the bill, according to Newsweek, received funding for lobbyists working for Saudi Arabia. Now, these are Republican Senators Roy Blunt of Missouri, John Boozman of Arkansas, Richard Burr of North Carolina, Mike Crapo of Idaho, and Tim Scott of South Carolina all received financial contributions for lobbying firms that work for Saudi Arabia. This is according to the Center for International Policy. The report names Blunt as one of the top 10 recipients of campaign contributions from firms representing Saudi Arabia in 2017, along with Democratic lawmakers like Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Robert Menendez of New Jersey. Blunt's campaign received about $19,250 in campaign contributions from Saudi-linked firms last year. Boozman and Crapo received $1,000 in contributions from Squire Patton Boggs' PAC, which was working for Saudi Arabia at the time, and Boozman, Crapo, Burr, and Scott all allegedly received donations of around $2,000 on days when they were contacted by Saudi lobbyists. Saudi Arabia spent about $27 million on lobbyists in 2017, which is why the last time Senator Sanders tried to introduce this piece of legislation, he got immediately voted down. Well, what changed, as I mentioned before, the death of Jamal Khashoggi. Now, that doesn't mean this is actually past the Senate. Right now, yes, you had senators voting 63 in favor and 37 against to move the resolution forward on Tuesday. But that is a procedural step that will see the bill move forward in the Senate. Right now, they've just allowed debate. So the final bill, again, could be amended, or it could be completely voted down by the same people who voted to advance this piece of legislation. So, but anyway, now here's the thing. What's going on in Yemen is a true humanitarian disaster. Right now, nearly 85,000 people, children, have died because of extreme hunger, thanks to the war backed by the United States. And you have 11 million people facing mass starvation right now. And yet, the only reason that we are backing Saudi Arabia is, well, again, because they're allies, and then, of course, the Houthi rebels are backed by Iran. So this is basically nothing more than a proxy war, and us, of course, trying to help our supposed allies in Saudi Arabia in exchange for cheap oil, etc., and weapons deals, and of course, the United Arab Emirates as well. But we have sold them weapons. We've provided, at the very least, logistical support, and we have ended up turning a blind eye when our weapons were used against civilian targets. There was a lot of reports coming out of the Middle East from different watchdog groups that showed that they had found pieces of wreckage, pieces of our weaponry with our logos on it and everything in the sites of buses that have been bombed, that have been destroyed from the air in Saudi airstrikes. So these were civilians that were murdered using our weapons. If that alone isn't enough for us to pull our support, and it should be, then I don't, what else? Well, again, it turned out that if you murder and dismember and then try to poorly hide that murder of a Washington Post journalist, well, then that's when, of course, Democrats and Republicans, some Republicans are actually going to pay attention. But here's the thing. Bernie Sanders has been railing against this for quite some time. And so Bernie Sanders continued to reintroduce this piece of legislation, and thankfully, he is finally able to get it out, at least into debate. Now, the Senate needs to pass this, as I said before. House needs to also take it up and pass it, and then it's got to go through Trump. Now, what's Trump going to do? Well, he's got two choices. He either vetoes the legislation or ends U.S. support for the war in Yemen. Now, I don't think that's going to happen because, let's face it, Trump loves Saudi Arabia. Why? It's because they buy apartments from him. Look, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is a friend to both Trump and Jared Kushner. So, is he going to end support? Unlikely. But nonetheless, this is a great piece of legislation, and I hope against hope that it does end up getting passed. It does end up in the White House, and they look at it and go, maybe we should. Maybe we should at least stop getting involved in this basically unconstitutional, unauthorized war. And it would be a very, very popular thing for Trump to do. So if he's looking to recoup some of his popularity, maybe this isn't the wrong way to go. In fact, a survey commissioned by the International Rescue Committee found that 75% of Americans oppose U.S. weapons sales to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. It also found that 82% believe Congress should vote to end or decrease arms sales to both two countries. So if you were to veto this, it would be extremely unpopular. But if you were to say, okay, let's not, maybe that might help. Either way, I think that the obvious solution is obvious. It's clear, right? Trump should sign it. It would be an amazing achievement. And look, it would be the first time the U.S. Senate voted to advance a resolution withdrawing U.S. armed forces from an unauthorized war. So, and to pass a resolution. Now, again, the question is, will the rest of the Senate vote to actually pass the measure? We don't know. Though I do know that if lawmakers actually did care about the wishes of the American constituent, and not just the donors, the defense contractors, then we'd immediately withdraw American support for the humanitarian disaster that is the war in Yemen. So it's time to pull our support. It is past time, and so let's make it happen. And we can thank Bernie Sanders for putting it forward. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.